Good morning. Welcome to Jubilee Circle. As you can see, I have this mask, this lovely mask on this morning. And you know what? This mask could be yours. We've got a lot of these. Oh yeah, Jubilee Circle masks that are available to for your own fashion statement out there. You can see this morning I'm a little bit on the alone side. It's summertime. Folks want to take a break, and so the band is on a break this week, and so you'll just hear me this morning. So in about 20 minutes, you'll be really sick of it, or I will anyway. So good morning, though, and welcome to Jubilee Circle. I am Candace Shalou. I am the spiritual director here at Jubilee Circle in Columbia, South Carolina, and today we are continuing our Via Positiva theme of the Great Wide Open. We're exploring ways that we can break our habit of closing our heart to the world and instead learn how to remain open no matter what the world is looking like around us, no matter how chaotic it might get. Scientists tell us that there are some basic essentials that all humans need to survive, including, of course, food, water, and shelter. But there's one other thing that has ensured human survival over the millennia that usually doesn't make the list, and that is compassion. I mean, we've all heard of the survival of the fittest theory, that those with the best physical and mental prowess are the ones most likely to survive in this dog-eat-dog world, but a lesser-known theory of Charles Darwin could also be called survival of the kindest. In his book, The Descent of Man and Selection in Relation to Sex, now there's a catchy title that flies right off the shelves, Darwin writes, communities which included the greatest number of the most sympathetic members would flourish best and rear the greatest number of offspring. Now, I'm not sure we want, I mean, it's great that you have children, but they flourish where there is compassion. So it's not just a nice thing to do, it is integral to our survival as a species. However, over the years, the real meaning and the real value of compassion seems to have been lost. Instead, compassion seems to have mutated into something along the lines of pity at best and gossip at its worst. And that's why it's imperative for us to learn how to live in the great wide open and be the channel of compassion that is needed in this world. Because when it is used effectively, compassion can be the key not just to our survival as a species in this unpredictable and infectious and sometimes cruel world, but it's also the most essential tool that our entire planet may need to survive. When we learn to be open channels for compassion, both for ourselves and for the world, that's when we become the embodiment of divine love that will make this whole world say, oh yeah. All right, so at each Jubilee Circle, we usually have lit things by now, but I haven't been playing with fire early this morning, so let me light some sage. You know, when you're doing this alone, you have people to remind you to do things. Although I do have some lovely assistants off camera who will be helping me with the drumming this morning, so thank you for that. So we won't be completely in silence this morning. All right, so wherever you are, you can rise, find the directions in your own home. I highly recommend that you do that because you can call the directions anytime. It doesn't just have to be here with us. So wherever you are, I invite you to turn and face the east. Holy One, we thank you for the kindness of the sun as it rises each morning, spreading its compassionate light and warmth without regard to human ideas of status or prestige. May we, Holy One, be like the sun, ready to spread our shining light all around this world, not asking if those around us are worthy of our gifts. Help us to just be as generous and compassionate as the sun. We'll turn to the right and we face the south. The warm winds blow as they will, Holy One, bringing their sweat-inducing heat into our world, even though as the humidity saps the moisture from our bodies, remind us to take a moment to appreciate the fire of the summer. Remind us, Holy One, to let our compassion burn like the passion of summer, to let it create in us a new commitment to find ways to show love to ourselves and to this world. We'll return to the right, we face the west. In the West, Holy One, we find stars rising and the darkness setting in each day. Remind us, even in these dark times, to reach out for that holy compassion that you offer in every moment. Help us to let go of anything that keeps us from experiencing the compassion around us, and to let go of anything that keeps us from giving compassion to ourselves and everyone we meet. Quarter turn to the right, and we face the north. As this blue boat we call home spins on its axis to allow fall and winter to come to us from the north in their due time, Holy One, remind us that the chill of these seasons befall us all, no matter where we are. The frozen and the barren times that cut right to the bone of every single one of us. In those frozen times, Holy One, remind us to bring the warmth of compassion to ourselves and everyone else we see, to provide a warm oasis for anyone seeking your holy presence. And as we turn back toward the center, I need to remind you this morning that we are all in need of compassion, but it's a two-way street. We need to travel in both directions, both giving and receiving compassion, because remember, giving and receiving are one. So as you're giving compassion, you receive it. As you receive it, you give it. But perhaps the person we need the most compassion for is ourselves, because unless we can be kind to ourselves, we will find it impossible to be kind to others. So when we master that self-compassion, then we can't help but spread that kindness into the world, so everyone gets to say, oh yeah. All right, so we're going to do things a little bit differently since we don't have the band today. We're going to skip an opening song. We're going to go right into some welcome and announcements and our readings, and then the meditation, and then another little meditation song, and then we'll go to our Zoom meeting. So that's the outline for today. If you want to see it in front of you, you can go to the website at jubileecircle.com or our Facebook page and download the PDF of today's celebration outline so you can see exactly how we're moving through this unique morning. So welcome again to Jubilee Circle. We are a spiritual community offering inspiration, affirmation, healing, and service to live abundantly, love wastefully, and awaken to our true divine self. And there's one more thing you need to do for me, is start the other two streams. I forgot about that. So go down to the stream tab, press the big portion of the stream tab, and then it'll say, nope. Hang on, everybody. I forgot to do very important pieces. Okay. All right. Software. Okay, now we're all on Facebook too. Sorry. My apologies to y'all on Facebook. You missed the first part because I forgot that we needed to press 2 more buttons before we started. So here we are. So welcome, everybody. We were just getting to the welcome part. So welcome to Jubilee Circle. I am Candace Shalou, the spiritual director here in Columbia, South Carolina, and the forgetful one who forgets there were 2 more streams, 2 more buttons that needed to be pressed this morning. So welcome, everybody. We are a spiritual community offering inspiration, affirmation, healing, and service to live abundantly, love wastefully, and awaken to our true divine self. And we are a progressive and inclusive community, and we are affiliated with the Jubilee community in Asheville, North Carolina. We're influenced by Hebrew and Christian scriptures, but we give that a metaphysical twist. We read that through the lens of A Course in Miracles. And we also ground ourselves in something called creation spirituality, which basically means, it means a lot of things, and creation spirituality is a pretty deep subject, but it basically means that we are not beginning in that place of original sin, which brings us toward how awful we are, but we are beginning in that place of original blessing, which is actually a theology that's older than original sin. It's that idea that we are originally blessed, that God created this infinite universe, this amazing blue boat we ride around upon, all the infectious creatures upon it, and finally, in that strange and controversial decision, God decided, hey, let's create human beings. And God did that, and it's sort of been uphill and downhill, 2 steps forward and 1 step back since then, because we human beings, we are amazing, we are beautiful, we are creative, we are infectious in good and bad ways, and we are beautiful, and we are maddening, and we are irritating, and we are greedy, and we are, I'm going to hear you guys say it, Recalcitrant. Yes, human beings. That's what we are. But God looked at all of that creation and said, oh, that is very, very good. And God continues to delight in all of creation and invites us to do so as well. Oh, yeah. So a few quick announcements. Coming up next Sunday, we're going to continue our Via Positiva theme of the Great Wide Open. There had been a scheduling snafu, and so I will not be at the Columbia UU next week. I will be right here, and we are going to continue our Great Wide Open theme with music from the Eagles as we learn how to open our heart to the power of prayer. And hopefully we can get all the band back together and be back as we usually are. We had announced last week that the band, otherwise known as the CC and the Recalcitrants, I'm so sorry Cece's not here. I'm the only Cece here today. So we're going to perform a virtual live concert. It was going to be this coming Friday, but it was going to be yesterday or last Friday. But we've moved it. It's going to be on August 14th now, Friday, August 14th at 7 o'clock. So we're going to have some originals and cover Corin tunes for all y'all. There will be a tip jar available to support Jubilee Circle, and so watch Facebook and our website for links to that. There is a board meeting today, so we're going to discuss ways that we might be able to do some limited reopening. Now that we have remodeled much of the space, we have much more room to do some social distancing and make sure that folks can come and gather safely. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and also about ways that you can support us. And one of the ways you can support us is through ordering a mask. And we're going to get the details up. We're selling these for $12, so that's a donation to us. And then you look incredible and stylish out there in your Jubilee Oh Yeah mask. And we have some other ideas on the table so that we can make it through this time when we're not being able to come together and do our social events like our open mics and some other things that help us support this community so we can continue to do Sunday mornings and everything else that we do. Let's see, and I think that is about it for announcements. Was that it? I don't think there's anything else. Okay, all right. Hear these wise and holy words. Ding. It's kind of sad, I know. From the Jesus story, Matthew 14:13 through 21. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the village and buy food for themselves." Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples. And the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. From A Course in Miracles, chapter 19. Only the sane can look on stark insanity and raving madness with pity and compassion, but not with fear. For only if they stare in it does it seem fearful, and you do not share in it. For only if they share in it does it seem fearful, and you do not share in it until you look upon your brother with perfect faith and love and tenderness. Before complete forgiveness, you stand unforgiving. You are afraid of God because you fear your brother. Those you do not forgive, you fear. And no one reaches love with fear beside him. This other who stands beside you still seems to be a stranger. You do not know him, and your interpretation of him is very fearful. And you attack him still to keep what seems to be yourself unharmed. Yet in his hands is your salvation. You see his madness, which you hate because you share it, and all the pity and forgiveness that would heal it gives way to fear. You need forgiveness of your brother, for you will share in madness or in heaven together. And you and he will raise your eyes in faith together or not at all. From Buddhist monk Pema Chodron. No matter what movie you're in, no matter what the plot is of the current film you're starring in, it is the vehicle for showing you the true nature of your mind. So I feel the whole thing comes down to being very, very attuned to one's emotions, to seeing how one is attached to the pleasant and has an aversion to what is painful. You work again and again on trying to discover how to get unhooked, to open and soften rather than to tighten and close down. It comes down to realizing the wisdom, that compassion, that realizing the wisdom and compassion that are contained in this life that we have just as it is. No matter how simplified or complicated life gets, it can make us miserable or it can wake us up. These are wise and holy words. Thanks be to the holy. All creation is holy word. All creation speaks volumes of the holy. Hallelujah. All right. Stop the smoke. All right, our song this morning comes from the British rock band The Kinks. Have some coffee. And this song is called Look Through Any Doorway. And it appeared on their 1991 release called Did Ya? It's a name for an album right there. Did Ya? All right. It goes something like this. Look through any doorway. Each life will tell its story. See the joy and heartbreak for all the world to see. She's on the city streets, on her face is desolation. Just a kid from out of town, in the land of hope and glory. Look through any doorway, each life will tell its story. See the joy and heartbreak for all the world to see. 3 years ago, back in 2017, author and social activist Bell Hooks did an interview with Buddhist monk Pema Chodron for the magazine Lion's Roar. And even through the pixels on the screen, you can feel Bell Hooks' anxiety as she pushes back on the venerable monk over her thoughts about issues on hope and activism, and in particular, compassion. In one question, Hooks admits that she finds Chodron's ideas really challenging. For Hooks and for all of the activists out there I know, including myself, we enter the fray for social change because we want to see the world improve. We want more compassion. We want more love and more peace and more justice in the world. And so we dedicate our lives to its pursuit. But Chodron says, if we approach life as the pursuit of a goal, even a worthy one, like the end of racism, she says we rob ourselves of being in the present. Right now, in this moment, is where all that work toward whatever goal we have is happening, Chodron says. The source of all wakefulness, she says, the source of all kindness and compassion, the source of all wisdom is in each second of time. Anything, she says, that has us looking ahead is missing the point, which can sound pretty discouraging until you understand her full point. What she's trying to say is, if we are constantly looking for something to happen in the future, we miss our chance to be the compassion that's needed in this moment. By seeing our goal as something that will arrive at some future point down the road, we miss the opportunity to diffuse the aggression, the meanness, the utter recalcitrance that's happening right now, which is the key to making the future different from the past. And I think Jesus understood this point way back in his time, and he illustrates it beautifully in today's reading. The passage begins in an odd place. It states, now when Jesus heard this, and what Jesus had heard is in the previous story What Jesus had heard was that Herod had put his cousin John to death. He had been beheaded as a cautionary tale to anyone who challenged or sought to even think about challenging Herod's authority. It was a serious blow, not just to Jesus personally, but to his ministry as he worked to assure people that the realm of heaven is within each of them and not found in anything outside in this ego-created system of the world. Herod's move, of course, was meant to engender fear in Jesus' followers, and it worked pretty well. I mean, after the news, more than 5,000 people are simply just milling about. They're awaiting some sort of direction, and the disciples, too, they're restless. They're asking Jesus if they can send this crowd away. They need to regroup and decide what the future of their ministry is going to look like. And like hooks, both the disciples and Jesus' followers, and us to a degree, they wanted to be told what to do, what action they could take in the aftermath of this terrible event. What would bring about the peace and the love and the justice that both Jesus and John had been going on about. Like so many of us, even in our modern times, we're simply just looking for what is the next thing to do to achieve our ultimate worthy goal. And for Jesus, I guess it might have been sorely tempting for him to just send them all away. I mean, both the disciples and the crowd, and just take time in private to grieve the death of his cousin. Then, however, the scripture tells us that when Jesus saw the crowd that had gathered, he had compassion on them. And that phrase is important because the phrase, he had compassion, I mean, we go, okay, fine, he had compassion. But in Greek, if you go back to the original Greek, it doesn't mean he had some sort of warm, fuzzy feeling for all these people who were around. That word, that phrase, he had compassion, it literally translates into being moved as to one's bowels. That's what it means. The compassion that Jesus felt for the crowd was literally gut-wrenching. He knew that the people needed him, not just for guidance to achieve some future goal, but they needed him in that moment. So he got to work. He started healing the sick among them. And when the disciples got hungry and wanted to send the crowd away to get food on their own, he said, no, your duty is to serve them right now. They need not go away, Jesus said. You give them something to eat. And those words must have felt as overwhelming to the disciples as children's words were to bell hooks. Children tells bell hooks, we limit what is limitless. And that's what Jesus is saying to his disciples right before that mass of people got their bellies full. We feel helpless when we forget that we are beings of unlimited power, when we realize that our ego-centeredness is just one way we limit the limitlessness of who we really are, then we can move out of our own way, and we can be the source of miracles. We can feed more than 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, and those miracles will become commonplace because we finally understand that there's no limit to how many people can be fed when we stop putting conditions on our unconditional love. Breathe deeply. Look through any doorway. Each life will tell its story. See the joy and heartbreak for all the world to see. Open up your heart. Open up the highway. The road will stretch before you. For there will be a new day where love will show the way. Only shadows of the world we left behind. Open up your heart. Many shadows of the past, so don't look back. Look at the walls apart, of greed affects us all. There's a better way, despite what they do or say. People of the world. centuries, there have been many explanations for the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000, which was really more than 5,000, because the 5,000 number in the Bible only counts the men, not the women and the children who were there with them. Okay, I'm not going to get on a tangent. Okay. So perhaps the real number was double or more. So some say this is an outright miracle. Jesus literally multiplies loaves and fishes. More just appear out of thin air in some miraculous form or fashion. 5,000 and more get fed. Still others contend that the generosity displayed by Jesus was infectious, and people just started to share openly with food that they had brought with them, but they weren't going to share before, and there was enough to go around. I think, though, that the key to this miracle was Jesus' own gut-wrenching experience of compassion. He tried to get away from the crowd, but when he experienced that feeling of compassion, and it was so deeply painful, I think Jesus is the one who experienced the first miracle, because he had a shift in his perception. He wanted to go away and be alone, but he didn't. But he had compassion. And a miracle is a shift in perception, and that's what Jesus had. His own perception shifted from being separate to being together, to being in unity. His ego and his manifestation in the disciples wanted to send the crowd away, but he was overtaken by his compassion, which in this case, of course, represents the Holy Spirit. He was moved from his own fear into love. And this is what allows us to work miracles, jubilants, our ability to so deeply feel compassion for ourselves in this world that we can perform acts that will feed the multitude. We don't believe that. And like Chodron says, we limit the limitless because we think that one little person can't change the world. But here's the good news, jubilants. We may appear to be one little person out here in the world, in our bodies, but in our minds, in our hearts, we are limitless because we are all part of God's limitless consciousness. We may appear to be individuals, but we're all just drops from the unified ocean of consciousness. That means we're all connected, and whatever spiritual revelation I may be having, looks like I'm having as an individual, it's happening because it's already occurring in the whole. As droplets of limitlessness begin to realize our true nature and we stop conditioning our unconditioned state, we become this unstoppable force in the world, like a vast ocean of compassion and love. And we scoff at this idea because we don't think it's true. We look around and we just see limited things, and we don't think that we are unlimited, limitless. But A Course in Miracles reminds us that we only feel that separation because we are afraid of those around us. And we are extra afraid of everybody right now. Maybe you are infectious. We're social distancing. We are so far away from each other. We see each other as strangers. We see them as a threat, not just to our ego, but maybe to our bodies too. This is where all the wars, where all the conflicts, both large and small, begin in our world. We are afraid of each other. We see each other as competition for limited resources, whether those resources are physical, like food or money, or intangible, like power and influence, and so we go to battle against one another. And this is the kind of thing, the exact kind of thing that got John the Baptist killed. Herod had him arrested because John kept telling him that it was unlawful for him to be consorting with his brother Philip's wife. Imagine that. John's demise began during Herod's birthday party, when the daughter of his consort danced before those gathered at the party, and she asked Herod for John's head. And Herod did it. He grudgingly complied. The daughter took that severed head to her mother as a trophy. This is a story of choosing separation, of choosing aggression against one another over unity. Herod was driven by his fear of John and his followers. He believed power was the ultimate prize in this life, and he was afraid of somebody coming in and taking that away from him. And that led him to be violent against anyone he saw as a threat. He limited his limitlessness. The urge in Jesus and his followers, if they were listening to their egos, would have been just that, to rise up in armed rebellion, overthrow Herod, And who would have blamed them? I mean, Herod was the cause of all their suffering and misery, and they would do the world a good deed by ousting him. Well, this kind of reaction, as Jesus and Pema Chodron both know, it doesn't solve anything. Instead, now you, in your anger and your fear, you have become just as much an aggressor as those you oppose. And when we can realize this, Chodron says, we begin to understand why there is racism, why there is cruelty, because everyone has the same thoughts and emotions that you do. Everyone feels that irritability, and then it escalates. And before we know it, we're returning a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye. The whole world is blind, believing wholeheartedly in its state as limited. And it's all an illusion. The truth is we are unlimited beings, sharing in an unlimited and abundant universe. And when we can truly get that in and believe it, we become loving, compassionate, miracle-making channels in this world. And we can only do that, the Course says, when we stop thinking of anyone in this world as an enemy or a stranger. You need forgiveness of your brother, the Course says, for you will share in madness or in heaven together. And you and your brother and sister will raise your eyes in faith together or not at all. Jubilants, we open ourselves to compassion, to love, to forgiveness for everyone or not at all. We can't be selective. We can agree to be in the madness of fear and conflict together, or we can create heaven together. Which would you rather have? Breathe deeper. Look through any doorway. Each life will tell its story. See the joy and heartbreak for all the world to see. Open up your heart. Open up the highway. The road will stretch before you. For there will be a new day where love will show the way. Only shadows of the world we left behind. Open up your heart. Many shadows of the past, so don't look back. Open up your heart. And I think what happened when Jesus encountered his own miracle, when he looked out on that crowd, that shift in perception from separation to unity, and he chose compassion, he chose unity over isolation, was that he knew what Pema Chodron was trying to teach bell hooks centuries later in this interview, when she said, from great suffering can come great openness of heart, a great sense of kinship with others. Or from great suffering can come hatred, resentment, and despair. We have the choice. We can use our suffering to stay open, to create unity, kinship. Or we can use our suffering to be channels of hatred and resentment and despair. So this is our challenge as we train ourselves to live in the great wide open, to not close our hearts to anyone, to anything, to any experience that comes before us in this moment. Closing our hearts, as I've learned in my life, it can lead to hatred and resentment and despair. You want to see that in action? Go to Facebook for 5 minutes. Lots of closed, hateful, and despairing hearts. Scroll through the timeline. They're there. The Course says, only the sane can look on stark insanity and raving madness with pity and compassion, but not with fear. So how do you become sane? You keep your heart open. You become willing to receive the miracle of unity over separation in every moment that confronts you. That's what Jesus did. Teacher Michael Singer has helped me over the past few months to start trying to practice this in earnest. He doesn't like to give you specific techniques to use, which can be maddening. But this one, he refers to over and over again. When you begin to feel weird inside, when you get those feelings of irritation or hatred or resentment or despair, and they begin to arise in you, and you know them when you feel them. It runs up the back of your spine. You feel it. You get all tingly. Your weirdness, spidey senses start to tingle. When that happens, he says, relax. Relax. Do not react in that moment. Don't do your habitual action of shutting down or turning away because you find the moment in front of you painful or difficult. That moment when Jesus saw those crowds, it hurt. It was painful for him. It was gut-wrenching because that jubilance is what real compassion feels like. It feels like a punch to the gut because compassion isn't some warm, fuzzy feeling. It's when you actually feel the pain of others so keenly that the only thing you can do is help them, heal them, be with them. You feed them in any way you can because you recognize that they are your salvation. And you can either create misery or joy in this world with them. If we remain in our ego, if we see this world as full of nothing but strangers and enemies, then we will avoid at all costs. We will close down immediately to prevent feeling the gut-wrenching joy of compassion. If, on the other hand, we learn how to live in the great wide open with our hearts wide open, ready to see our unity instead of separation, then we will feed everyone who crosses our path. Every moment will be better because it passed in front of us. And Jesus said over and over, we can do all of his miracles and more. We can do greater works than these, Jesus said. But you got to keep your heart open to compassion. And if you do, then in your lifetime, you won't feed 5,000 or 10,000 people. You'll feed millions and millions of people, whether you give them actual food or not. But that's only if you're willing to be an open channel of love and compassion in every moment. I invite you, jubilants, look through any doorway this week, and you will see stories of heartache and separation pour out of the people around you. They are not strangers. They are not your enemy. They are just like you because you are them. They are you. We are all drops in the same ocean. Open yourself. Open yourself to their pain. Open yourself to their joy. And you will find, I promise, you will find that love will show the way. Look through any doorway. Each life will tell its story. Open up your heartache, and love will show the way. Searching for the way through all the doubt and sorrow. Days turn into years, but we'll build a new tomorrow. Look through any doorway. Each life will bear its treasure. Open up your heartache, and love will show the way. All the shadows of the world we left behind. Open up your heart. Many shadows of the past, so don't look back. Open up your heart. Open up your heart. Look through any doorway. Tell me what you see. Look through any doorway. Oh yeah. I invite you during this prayer time, if you have a singing bowl, invited to ring it and sing it. And if you don't, why not? Because they're fun. You ought to have one. I invite you to get one.
Everything is sacred. Everything is filled with the divine. Everything is alive with spirit, with spirit. Everything is a wonder, unfolding right before our eyes. Everything is alive with spirit, with spirit. Everything is a blessing, bursting from the earth and sky. Everything is alive with spirit, with spirit. Everything is sacred. Everyone is filled with the divine. Everyone is alive with spirit, with spirit. We are alive with spirit, with spirit. We are alive with spirit, with spirit. Everything is sacred.
We're going to adjourn to our Zoom meeting a little bit early today. I seem to have filled a good amount of time on my own. Very good. All right, so I do want, before we adjourn to our Zoom meeting, where we can come together and discuss the lesson for today. And if you agree with me, great. If you disagree with me, even better. Come on, come to the Zoom meeting. Let's talk about it. I always like to have a good discussion afterwards, so please join us. The link is, of course, on our webpage at jubileecircle.com or on our Facebook page. And also, while you're there, on the Facebook page or on our webpage at jubileecircle.com, there is a place where you can press a button and electronically send us money, send us funds. And it's important, especially during this time, that we have your support. And I want to thank those who have continued their support for Jubilee Circle. We are very, very, very incredibly grateful for those who have continued to give their gifts and their tithes and their offerings to Jubilee Circle so we can survive during this time of COVID when we're not coming together. And we hope that we can come together again soon, even on a limited basis, so we can start to come back and enjoy this beautiful building that we have. And in the meantime, we just solicit your support to keep us afloat, to keep us going. We've done okay, but last month was a little rough. So if you have some extra in your pockets or in your bank accounts this month, we ask kindly, humbly, that you give some of it our way so we can continue our work here in Columbia, South Carolina, and also to maintain this building so we will have it when we can come back and be a community in person once again. So thank you for those who have given, for those who are contemplating giving, for those who are already pressing the button. We are grateful for you, and we know here at Jubilee Circle that giving and receiving are all one thing. Since we are the ocean, we are droplets in this vast ocean. What we do for others, we do exactly for ourselves. And so giving is receiving. And so we always say that God's love has always and will always meet my needs. I give freely and receive joyfully, knowing giving and receiving are the same. Thank you so much for joining us this morning at Jubilee Circle. I really appreciate it. Hopefully the band, hopefully we'll get all the band back together next week, and things will be wonderful and back to some sort of normal here in this time. And so I just invite you to remember that Meister Eckhart tells us if the only prayer we ever say in our entire lives is thank you, it will be enough. And here at Jubilee Circle, we always end by realizing that this amazing world, if you look at it and you see it the way God sees it, all you'll know to say is,